Welcome everyone, as I already am losing my computer, to Truth Talking in Tough Times. And we are going to have a really good time chatting today about life, hardship, tough times, historical, tough times present. Welcome, loves. So I'm Nic Stone. I am your head wrapped, chilling in a tent, literally in my backyard moderator. And I am really excited to be here with the five of you today. If you will, I will call a name and I want you to say who you are and what book you are here to talk about. Traci.
Hi, I'm Traci Chee. I'm the author of We Are Not Free, a young adult historical novel and stories about the Japanese American incarceration camps in World War II.
Love it. Romina?
Hi, I'm the author of Lovisona, which is about a girl, Manu, who is undocumented from Argentina, living in Miami and hiding with her mom, who discovers she's not exactly human, and it's not just her US residency that's illegal, but her entire existence.
Cool.
Whew. Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah Watson. I'm the author of this book, Most Likely, which is about four best girlfriends, their senior year of high school, and we know a secret they don't, which is that one of them will grow up to be the president of the United States.
Wild. Becky?
Hi, I'm Becky Albertalli, and I am one of the authors of Yes, No, Maybe So. So this is a collaboration with my friend Aisha Saeed. And this is about a Jewish boy and a Muslim girl who team up to knock on doors and canvass for a local candidate running for office in their district in Georgia. So.
Love it. And Cecil?
Hi, I'm Cecil Castellucci. I'm co-creator of The Plain Janes with artist Jim Rugg. The Plain Janes is a graphic novel. And it's all about a girl who, after surviving a terrorist bombing in a fictional American city, her parents move her to the suburbs, and she decides to sort of deal with her trauma by forming an all-girl guerrilla art group that starts to do art attacks to make something surprising be something beautiful rather than something horrific. So that's The Plain Janes.
I love it. So a couple of you, actually most of you, have these really powerful themes of empowerment, which I think is something we could all use a bit more of right now while we are trapped inside of our houses. Sarah, I want to actually start with you. In your book, now first of all, you are also a television writer, a television creator, which is really awesome. And what I love about your work, both The Bad Type, which is a TV show. I mean, The Bold Type.
Bold type. I like The Bad Type. Woo!
Bad Type, the BA Bold Type. And your book, Most Likely, they both center on this like empowerment of girls through friendship.
Yes.
How do you think friendship has the power to kind of save us in times like the ones we're living in now?
Well, I think, first of all, I think it was because of my TV experience, and it's such a male-dominated field, and because we are always so encouraged to write these catty women who stab each other in the back, and I never saw that as realistic. Those aren't the kind of friendships I have. I feel like we're so informed by our friendships. And what really inspired this book is I was reading Hillary Clinton's book, What Happened, and she has a chapter about going away to college. And she was a Republican when she went to college and had very different political beliefs, and then got to know this group of really feminist women who became her really strong, solid girlfriends. And it really informed who she was. And so it made me start thinking about my own female friendships and how not only do we lift each other up, but we are the women we are because of the friends we had as girls.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started really thinking about whoever does become our first female president is really going to owe a huge debt of gratitude to her high school girlfriends, because they're the ones who got her there.
I completely agree. And I think, Cecil, you would too, because with Plain Janes, there's a similar theme of girls who are different, who come from different walks of life, coming together to kind of help each other out and keep each other encouraged. My favorite thing about Plain Janes is the fact that like this is a long-standing thing. Like it started in 2007, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was my senior year of college. What does it feel like returning to the world now in 2020?
Well, I mean, one thing that Jim Rugg and I talked about a lot was how, sadly, in a way, the book is even more relevant now than it is when it came out. We felt it was relevant then, it was, but now it's sort of like, we were kind of like, whoa, this is kind of intense. One of the things that was really interesting was, so the Plain Janes, this is an omnibus of book 1, 2, and a brand new book 3. Mm-hmm. Jim and I had originally planned it as 4 books, and but we condensed book 3 and 4 into 1 book for this. We wrote that in 2006, 2007, and but we've both grown as artists since then. Jim is a better artist, and I'm a better writer, hopefully. Who knows? And to go back and try to mimic a more innocent or naive, juvenile writer voice, and for him to go back and try to draw in that way was really freeing, because it showed you how far you've come, but also it was like really strange to have to mimic a style that we both have left behind. So that was, pretty interesting. But just to go off your theme, the power of friendship is Jim and I have such a close collaboration and became such great friends working on it that, we couldn't be the comic book creators that we are now if we hadn't have started out together 13 years ago. It was my first comic book, and it was his first major comic book. So it was, that power of friendship right there, that we 100% informed each other's growth artistically.
Yeah, that's awesome. And Tracy, you have the way that you utilize friendship in your work. First of all, I love your work. I'm just saying. I remember talking about this book years ago. I can't remember where we were, but we were like in a hotel somewhere talking about this thing that you were working on that's a complete departure from what we have come to expect from Traci Chee. So We Are Not Free, first of all, the cover is amazing. But in your story, friendship functions in a different way. And if you would talk about how friendship helps people get through like dehumanizing times, I would love to hear from you on the connections between the stories in your books and how the friendships help these people get through this terrible thing in history.
Yeah. So I wrote this as a novel in stories because I wanted to kind of capture some of the multifaceted, not monolithic experience of the Japanese American teenagers during World War II. And that was a challenge because it has 14 points of view. There are 14 main characters in it. And the best way I could think to link all of these stories was through love. Mm-hmm. Every character loves another character, and that's what draws the reader through the story. We start with a little brother, we go to his older brother in the second chapter, we go to his girlfriend in the next chapter, and so on and so forth. And so the whole thing is kind of this chain of affection that these people have for each other despite the turmoil that's going on. And so I wanted to show kind of how, in a time when your entire family and your entire community is being forcibly evicted from their homes and sent to barbed wire incarceration camps in the middle of the desert, the one thing that they try to cling to is each other. They mm-hmm. have this friendship. Their families are kind of being ripped apart, but this is like their peers. This found family that they have is kind of the one thing that they have, and the one thing that really sustains them through the course of 3 years of World War II.
Yeah. And Becky, there's a similar thing in your book where you have these people from different backgrounds actually, but there's this same idea of love kind of sustaining this thing that they're trying to do. You mentioned that in Yes, No, Maybe So, there's, I don't know if you mentioned it, maybe I'm mentioning it, there's a Jewish boy and a Muslim girl, and as they're canvassing and trying to help this person get elected in their city or in their state, you see this beauty of friendship forming between two vastly different people. How do you think that kind of friendship and relationship, where you have people from just completely different walks of life, like what does that teach us about humanity?
That's a really good question, because I think, you know, it's interesting. There are different ways to look at Maya and Jamie and their backgrounds. And, you know, Jamie, who I wrote, is Jewish, like I am. And Maya is written by Aisha Saeed, who is Muslim. And actually, like, we have always weirdly thought of kind of them coming from very similar backgrounds, partially because they're both from, you know, they are from the same state Senate district, you know, so that's like a pretty small area. So they're from the same part of the Atlanta suburbs. You know, and their moms knew each other in baby groups. So they do have kind of some community connections in that way. Mm-hmm. But also because I think, like, I mean, Aisha and I have always felt like there's so much in common between Judaism and Islam, and you know, it's been kind of it's been a difficult couple of years, like for I mean, like the understatement of the century, but like one of the multitudes of ways that the last couple of years have been difficult is that I think you know, there's this narrative that's kind of taken over that Jewish people and Muslim people are kind of like in opposition to each other. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I mean, I don't speak for all Jews. Aisha doesn't speak for all Muslim people, but that has not been anything like our experience. Like, oh, hello.
Hi, Kate.
Yeah, there. This is Willow. Willow's actually in the book. Yeah, so I think you know, so it's hard to kind of take that and bring, you know, and kind of make a big statement of like, we are all, you know, we kind of all have these core things in common. You know, I think you know, it's more kind of, we wanted to take the opportunity to kind of unpack some of those conversations and just sort of zoom in a little bit on, you know, these two kids who are members of these two communities that, you know, are pitted against each other sometimes by like third parties.
Yeah. And I love also the experience of cultures in Yes, No, Maybe So, which brings me to Lobizona, which I cannot wait to get my hands on. So it's out in August, right? August 4th?
That's right. Also, we got pushed back.
Everybody is out except for you and Tracy. Tracy, you are
September 1st. Yeah.
Okay, so September 1st and August 4th. Make sure you pre-order those. But so I'm excited about Lobizona because of the experiences we're going to get to have with Argentinian culture and folklore. And I want to know from you, so it deals with the experience of being undocumented, but you have like magic, and she's a bruja, and her brother is a werewolf, right? Like, and it has to do with folklore. And I want to know why I guess you decided to take this contemporary issue and put it within a supernatural story.
Good, awesome question. So what's funny is I can't wait for you to read it in particular, because there are like Harry Potter references all over, and your Hope Nation essay was like one of my favorites, and I was like, okay, we would totally get along so great because we geek out on the same stuff. And so yeah, I'm curious what you'll think of some of the stuff, but there is a conversation in there that kind of gets to the heart of this, where, you know, my protagonist Manu is obsessed with Harry Potter and Hogwarts because she's stuck growing up undocumented alone. And, you know, so what could be more magical than finding out this is the reason you're a wizard, Harry. And so she really struggles with that. And at one point, you know, her mom kind of doesn't understand why she loves Harry Potter books and isn't reading more from her own culture. And, you know, and she says to her when she's like, why don't you try Harry? She's like, name a Latinx character in it and maybe I'll try it. And like Manu's like, you know, you missed the whole point, you know? And the whole thing that she's saying is, you know, she loves the Weasleys and she wants to live in the borough. And she's like, it's not about their language they speak or what they look like or any of that. And that's what her mom doesn't understand. She wants a sense of belonging, and like they have that. So I mean, they know who they are, what family they belong to, everything. And that was a big thing that I longed for always. So when I immigrated here at the same age as Manu, and I felt like, you know, it feels like you come from two worlds but belong to neither, you know, and you speak two languages, but you still lack the words to define yourself and understand, like, what label am I? Who am I? Like, how I can't reduce to one word, and therefore, you know, you just wonder, where do you fit? And so it made me think a lot about the topic and the subject of being an immigrant and what that means. And is it a label or is it a state of being? Is it a state of existence where we don't quite exist in an area, we walk in the lines between borders, you know, and that kind of gives us a different perspective. And it's sad because you lose that permanence of home and belonging, but you gain such a different view of life, as we know, because I think a lot of us writers, we feel like outsiders in some way, you know, and that gives us a cool viewpoint. But funny enough, I did want to mention that, you know, what got me to write about this, you know, when the magic and mixing it with this message is, I originally wrote a version of this in 2008. And when I tried to go out with it, agents told me that US readers, teens, would not care about Argentine immigrants. And the whole basis of this was what you said. It was Argentine folklore. There is a superstition that says 7th sons will be born werewolves and 7th daughters will be born witches, brujas. And I thought that was so cool because there is an actual law, you can look this up, La Ley de Padrinazgo Presidencial in Argentina, that says the president of Argentina becomes godparent to the 7th consecutive son or daughter born in a family and covers all their educational expenses. And so there's so much debate over how did this law get started? Was it the superstition or is it something else? I feel like it's gotta be the why else would you offer this if not that people really believed it? So I wrote a whole story called Yellow Eyes about this whole thing, you know, and when I was told that, you know, I walked away from those characters. I started writing like what's socially acceptable, you know, I mean, the series that I got published on is Zodiac, and it's not even in this world because I didn't want to deal with rejection of my real identity anymore. I could take rejection of my Zodiac sign. And it was a friend of mine, Tomi Adeyemi, who actually brought me back to sitting down and fighting, you know, because we were talking about all this, and before she got published, we went to the same college. And so we kind of developed this relationship where we were talking about she was going out to agents, I had Zodiac out. And it's so funny how I thought at the start, maybe I was like having this mentor role. And in the end, she was the one who gave me my power back, you know, by like being like, I believe in you in this story, go back to it. Cause I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. All this stuff is happening at the border. I feel like I have this platform. I don't know if, you know, and she was like, this is how you fight. Yeah. So yeah.
That's amazing. And like, I love that xenophobia is a theme in a few of these books. Tracy, it's definitely a theme in yours. And you have people who go from being at home, like this is like their nation of citizenship, and suddenly they are treated in an appalling way. And Becky, you even explore xenophobia a bit in Yes, No, Maybe So with Aisha. And I think that like at times like these, when we're dealing with so many things at once, it's important for us to be writing books like this, which leads me to a question in our Q&A box. This is from Ann Beamish. She says, what do you say to those who think we need to shield young people from dark topics? Have at it.
I'll have at it because most likely was heavily influenced by a dark topic. When I first started writing this book, I set it in the 90s, thinking that whoever would become the president, it would be the first female president, and she would be becoming president now. Then the Parkland shooting happened. And I watched this generation just rise up in these spectacular ways. And we cannot shield them because life is happening all around them. And I mean, what these students are going through compared to what I went through as a student is just truly unbelievable. So not only should we not shield them, we should empower them and empower their voices, because like I said, watching those Parkland students, it made me realize, oh, this is the generation. They're the ones who are going to save us. They are the ones who are going to use their voices in these really spectacular ways.
I mean, kids are living in the same world that we live in. It's not like they live in some different world where the things are not happening to them every day as well. So I think we have to talk to them. We have to talk directly to them because, you know, especially as adults, we need to be able to say, like, we're here with you. What do you need? You know, like, you know, and you have an outlet to say it. I mean, with the Plain Janes, the way that art and activism plays out, you know, that they do art in order to express voice when they have no voice to sort of be able to speak, which I think is a powerful thing that kids can do because they don't have the power to vote. They don't have the power to, you know, do all of those things.
I think that there's a really beautiful awareness and connectedness to our society now, and that affects teenagers. And the thing is that they have been living it since for all time. My grandparents were the ones who were incarcerated in World War II, and my grandma was 13, my grandpa was 16, and they spent the majority of their teenage years in these incarceration camps. And they had to live it because that was the world that was going on around them. And I think the importance of writing about kind of teenagers of the past living these times, or teenagers in a speculative world living through these kind of dark times, helps to give people a vocabulary and a way of dealing with kind of the dark times that are happening now.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah, I think like
any ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we need to be telling these narratives. You know, there's children who were babies who were separated at the border. If that child is not spared, your child shouldn't be either, frankly. Like, it's true, you know, like they're living in the same world. And I think I say this very passionately because I regret my decision in 2008 of giving up on that book. And like, I should have fought, you know, and especially when I started seeing everything happening, I was like, this is the problem. This is why we need Own Voices books. We need to read all of these stories and see everyone as a person with their own story and generate empathy, particularly at a young age. I think the sooner people are exposed to the fact that, hey, not everyone has a roof over their shoulder. Not everyone is guaranteed a meal when they walk into their kitchen. Not everyone has the comforts you have. Maybe we'll get at a better place, because obviously shielding kids has not yielded to anything great, you know?
Yeah. And like, I think because you guys are, and me too, obviously, we're writing books about some pretty intense things, like Cecil in Plain Janes. One of the things I love about Plain Janes is that you deal with like what it's like to be outcast, right? And it's one of those things where I feel like everybody at some point has felt like they are on the outside. So the fact that you had these girls finding each other and being bothered by the apathy of adults around them. I want all of you to speak to, with this question that I just asked, I kind of want to add on to it and add on to this idea that like a lot of times teenagers are paying more attention than we are, right? And so Cecil, you're dealing with kind of this apathy that these girls are seeing in the suburbs, but also with like the fear of the adults around them and how these adults, their fear keeps them from acting.
Yeah. You know, so one thing that I always remembered about my own experience, I'm sure you all did as well growing up, is that even in a cool clique, there's like a hierarchy. and everybody thinks that a different clique is the cool clique, you know, like, and so what I wanted was, the idea sprang forth from these like girls sitting at a table. They're at the loser table, and they all like, you know, Science Jane wants to be with the science cool kids, and like Theater Jane wants to be with the theater cool kids, and but the main Jane, you know, Jane Beckles, is like, you're the coolest. Look at you, you're amazing, you know. So I wanted to talk about, you know, about that, but also I wanted to talk about how we heal from trauma. You know, Jane, you know, is in a bombing. I was in a bombing when I was young. I was in an IRA bombing, and I never quite figured out how to, you know, sort of talk about it. You know, and this was the first time that I did. I was always scared for no reason. I used to run because I just suddenly would not feel safe, you know, and you know, this was in the 80s. And it was very hard for me to sort of articulate what was going on, you know, in my sort of mental state, but also the other people. I mean, you know, when you go through something like that, and I'm sure a lot of people have been through horrible, horrible things, you're not, the thing that happens to you is not the only person that's affected, you know? And so I wanted to show how Jane's mother is experiencing trauma as well, because she almost lost her daughter, and that the different ways that we engage with trauma. Jane Beckles' mother shuts down. She's, you know, she won't leave the house. She's very agoraphobic. The world is too scary. They move out of the city. And Jane, as a young person, is like, I don't want this to defeat me, even though every day is a fight for me to like get out of bed or not be like totally sideswiped by the news, which when we have, you know, post-traumatic stress, you know, like you never know what's going to trigger you with that. So I really wanted to address the different ways that people, you know, more specifically Jane and her mother, sort of try to cope with trauma, you know, and move forward with life. And for me, my motto in life is art saves. And so for me, it's like, you make art. And I think that's how I coped as well with something that I couldn't understand when I was younger. You know, it's stuff that comes up constantly, you know, in my work. And whenever something terrible happens, you know, it's always like, okay, I don't want to say like, now I'll make art, but like, it's like, how do I process this? I'm gonna try to find a way to give voice to this nameless, scary thing that I can't articulate.
Yeah. There's a question in the question and answer box that I actually want to throw at Becky. Because what I love about all of your books, Yes, No, Maybe So specifically, is that you manage to integrate kind of social issues into really fun stories that are fun to read. Like, they're hard to read at times, but there's always this measure of like humor and heart. How do you balance, and like what kind of boundaries do you have to set for yourself when you're writing books that deal with tough topics?
Yeah, I love that question. And this is something that maybe more so than anything else, like, was, you know, the thing that Aisha and I kept discussing and checking in on as we were working on this project, because Yes, No, Maybe So is a rom-com. I think, you know, the cover even is like very rom-com-ish, and there is kissing and crushing, and like there's like, you know, and just a lot of the narrative is, you know, just these two teenagers like working their way through like these rom-com beats that we just like love to write. And you know, and it's also a very political book about like Trump's America and, you know, to kids from marginalized religions, and kind of, you know, it's Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, and kind of, you know, how those two experiences are like and also different. And, you know, it's, I think early on we, you know, made the commitment to not pull back on the reality of Maya and Jamie's experiences kind of in those tough moments, but to also not pull back on the joy. There's something that Aisha would quote a lot on tour. And she's quoting from a different Aisha. So there are two Aishas, but the person who said this quote is an author named Aisha Metu. And we love this quote: "Joy is an act of resistance." And to see, like, and particularly, marginalized kids, like, being joyful, like, that is a kind of resistance, and that's important. And like, I agree so much, like, it just, I am so inspired by kind of the activism that I see from teens, and just the passion, and just, the teens who are rising up to try to, like, clean up our adult messes. And I see it happening, and I appreciate it, and they shouldn't have to do that. And it sucks that they're having to do that. And I think for us, and for this particular story, these kids, like, have their fight, and we wanted them to, like, be able to make out, and to to like watch TV, and text each other, and
yeah, all the kissing.
Yeah.
You can save the world and get the guy or the girl too.
Yes,
That's
absolutely.
big fan of that.
Sarah, I want to. I'm having fun going through some of the Q&A in the Q&A box, and there's a question here that makes me want to kind of jump to you. In Most Likely, what I love is that you're juggling a lot of different things. You're dealing with a bunch of girls who are all dealing with separate things. There's a question of, there's a girl who's been adopted, and though she has a great life, she kind of wants to know her birth mother. There's economic inequality that you address. There's kind of the flaws in standardized testing systems that you address. With all of these things, how do you, but, like, the thing is, like, it's still a book that has a very central theme, which is, like, friendship and empathy. How do you manage to balance both of those things, like addressing so many things, but also making it a story about empathy and friendship?
Well, I think because everything they go through as friends. So even though they're all dealing with separate issues, there's this unifying force of none of them are going through it alone. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the issues that they were facing, they felt so real to me. It felt like what seniors in high school are dealing with now. And, like, the adoption storyline in specific, when I first started coming up with the idea for this book, I learned I had a cousin I never knew I had before. And I got to meet her for the first time. And she's older than I am. And so even, in her 50s, just that constant, and having had a wonderful life, that constant wondering of where did I come from and what is my identity? So I think I was just so influenced by so many things that my friends were going through, and just how we all went through them together. So it's interesting. It kind of, like, balancing in terms of, like, how much story each girl got was really hard, but balancing in terms of how they faced it together was actually the easy part.
Nice. I love it. This is a really good question that I'm just going to toss out in general here. With the current state of the world in terms of isolation, do you think we need to re-envision how we write human interactions moving forward? It's a real good question. Like, that's like a question.
Well, I think we do, because, I don't know about your all situations, or anybody who's out there. I'm completely alone. Like, I don't have a roommate. I don't have anyone. I haven't really seen anybody except for my post person, or like the times I go to the farmer's market to get some. That's a very different. This is a different human interaction than the human interaction that you have with your families, than the way that we had before. And I think that we as writers will have to reframe the way that we engage, not only in our fiction, but in our reality as well.
You know what? I am going to disagree on this one. I think that maybe the modes of communication connection change. And I'm thinking about when I was doing research for We Are Not Free, I stumbled upon this huge stack of letters that my grandma had written to my grandpa had written to my grandma from basic training. And so it covers months and months and months of their lives and them falling in love with each other, like through the mail. But two kids falling in love, that happens, all the time. And I could see that happening now through Zoom or some through text, you know what I mean?
Or through mail.
Yeah, or through Tumblr. And so I think like maybe the modes change, but kind of that core of human connection, I think that's a through line that will remain the same.
It is interesting to think about how we tell stories though, because I remember after September 11th, just those initial conversations of, will we ever be able to have comedies again? Mm-hmm. And obviously we did. And, my boyfriend and I have been watching this PBS documentary on the flu pandemic of 1918. And it's like, when you watch that, it's like, how could your lives ever be normal again? And then the roaring 20s were right around the corner. So I do think, we're going to have to see different realities in storytelling. I mean, just before the pandemic hit, I was shooting a pilot in Atlanta that we had to shut down for this. And now the network has asked me to think about, like, make sure you play the realities of COVID. And I'm kind of like, what are the realities of COVID? And, obviously we would be shooting on the other side, but like, I don't know what life is going to be like. Are we going to have a vaccine and suddenly the world goes back to normal? Or, the humanity is the only thing that will never ever change.
But there's always like a before and the after, right? Like, even I think I agree with you, Tracy, like the modes don't change, but I think the fact that we all as a planet have been put into sort of isolation does change. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but when I see people like on television or in a movie, I'm like, why are you standing so close? Back off, And I think that for a while, that's definitely going to be in our muscle memory as writers. Just like when you watch a movie pre 9/11 and people run up to the gate at the airport and you're like,
you're like, that's not real. Like, it's like, that doesn't happen.
Yeah. But also about the Plain Janes deals so much with how we experience trauma. We're all experiencing it together. And I think, we as adults don't even fully have the language for it. And, my boyfriend's an 8th grade teacher, and I know his students don't necessarily have the language for it. So there is this collective trauma that we all have on the other side.
And our writing is reflective of the world. Quite frankly, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. So absolutely it's going to influence. How it will influence doesn't mean it's going to be a literal translation of, I'm now going to write what I see, because that's just not how most writers work, unless it's nonfiction. But in fiction, I think you're going to see so many interpretations of this, be it stuff in space, stuff in like fantasy realms, contemporary set, in, maybe a minute into the future, or in, alternate histories or whatever, where, maybe there will be something about like the Spanish influenza, what happened, like when that wasn't contained and how that changed. And now there's an alternate history and whatever. Do you know what I mean? Like there's going to be such a wealth of creative ideas from it that yes, it's going to impact. I just think the beauty of art is we don't know how.
I'm looking forward to what the teenagers who are growing up now in 20 years, I can't wait to see the art that they're going to make about this time. My goddaughter is a senior in high school this year, and it's very traumatic for her. She, no graduation, no prom, she's an artist. She goes to an art school. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, of course, I'm here for you. But in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to see what you make in 20 years, So all you teenagers out there, make art. I want to see it.
Make art, yeah.
So we have 2 minutes left. And sorry if I didn't get to your questions. There were literally 150 of them. And there was no way that we were going to get to most of them. Let's give a 1-sentence tip for being creative during quarantine.
Oh.
Well, I'm doing a micro postcard project. I think I sent one to Sarah. Did you get your? So I found all these vintage postcards, and I'm writing an original mini short story and putting it in the mail. And so that's old school communication, tiny art things. So I say, write a little story and mail it to someone.
Love it.
I'd suggest giving yourself a creative space. And that could be an actual kind of corner of a room that you set up just for making art, or kind of a mental headspace, or a place in your backyard or on your porch or on your balcony, some place where you can feel safe and protected enough so that you can produce something.
I would say rely on your friends. It's been so hard for me to focus. And so Cecil and I are actually in a Slack channel together, and it's all writers. And we share small goals. We set small goals together. We're going to do a writing sprint of just 15 minutes. And there's something about that accountability, and something also nice about knowing that everybody is struggling, that really has helped me kind of find my focus. And also knowing that, like, at the end of that 15 or 20 minutes, I'm going to have to, like, log back onto that Slack and say, like, either I stared at Twitter for 20 minutes or I wrote something beautiful.
Love it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm struggling with this, and I am like taking in your advice, but I would just say, like, you know, show yourself some grace. Like, we are all in very different situations in isolation that looks differently for all of us. Do your best, but you know, you're still great.
Yeah, and you know, something I like to do is journaling. You know, if you're feeling like you're having a hard time opening up to people, or you just need a creative space to take down your thoughts, or even if you're missing a specific character who gives you comfort and you can't keep rereading the same book again and again and again, and you want new scenes, write them yourselves. Write to that character. What would they say to you? What do you need to hear right now from them to be okay? Write to them every day if you need to. It's not nuts. It's great. Trust me. The weirder, the better.
And mine is like Wattpad's awesome. That's all I'm gonna say. There's stories there. I'm doing a story there. It's just a really awesome space to connect with other people who love reading and writing. And that is all from us, friends. We hope that this was an enjoyable experience for everyone.